Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the breakout session for the Agribusiness Management track. My name is Emily Carls, and I will be the moderator for today's session. Before I introduce today's speaker, I'd like to mention that there will be one CEU in professional development available for attending this breakout session. We will have details at the end of the session offering a CEU on how to access your credit. We appreciate the opportunity to partner with CCAs to offer this additional benefit. I'm happy to introduce Craig Lemoine presenting what to do when it's time to hang up the boots. Dr. Lemoine, CFP, MRFC, is currently the director of the Financial Planning Program at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, where he serves as the associate clinical professor teaching courses in risk management, retirement, and financial planning. Craig earned both his Ph.D. and undergraduate degrees from the Texas Tech University College of Human Science. Craig's earned his Ph.D. in personal financial planning in 2013 and undergraduate degree in family financial planning in 1998. Craig, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Emily. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm excited to share some thoughts on retirement with you and what to do when it's time to hang up the boots. And I really love that title for what we're doing today. And the reality is, farmers rarely actually retire, right, in a traditional sense. It's not quite like corporate America where you hit an age, take a banker's box, pack your stuff in and go, right? It's not the same. And so we're going to talk a little bit about those differences today. We're going to talk about strategies. And at any time that you have a question, please put it in the chat. I'd like for this to be very interactive, back and forth. And we're more than happy to talk strategy and retirement without giving specific stock advice. I'm more than happy to share retirement strategies and plans with you. So with that in mind, I'd like to break this section out and get going. I've broken this into some different takeaway areas, and each section is going to have one big takeaway for you. The very first thing I want us to think through today is redefining retirement and get a better grasp of what does it mean to retire, right? I really like the words financial independence, and we'll jump into that a little later. The second is that the retirement conversation today is all about income. It's the importance of income and how expensive income has become. Secured guaranteed income is not cheap. And so we're going to talk about how expensive that is to create income out of bonds, out of land, out of insurance products, what that cost has gone up quite a bit. Then we're going to talk about how much do you need to save before you become financially independent, right? What is kind of the goal? Where do we end up? We're going to dig a little bit into tools to help you save, and then risks that maybe you don't think about in retirement. And if anytime you got questions as we're going, I'd be more than happy to answer, help give a little thought to your situation. But we're going to start our conversation today with redefining retirement. We have this idea that retirement means we've stopped working. And I'd like to rewire that idea in your head. Retirement doesn't necessarily mean I've stopped working. Retirement means that I can work for my passion. I have a little less pressure on me than I had before. A little less stress, a little less strain. And so that's more what I want to consider as far as what does financial independence mean? Before we even get rolling here, as we look at financial independence through retirement planning lens, the more you can break big picture goals down, the better off we're going to be in our conversation today. You sit down and you talk with a client and they say, I want to spend more time with my family. All right, that's a great goal, but can you put some parameters on that for me? What does that mean to you? Does that mean a little travel after COVID? Does that mean visiting with family and friends, taking some 3-day weekends, having someone else run the operation so you don't have to run it and you just make maybe some strategic decisions, right? What does it mean to spend more time with family? And the more we can put some more parameters, some quantitative goals on that, right? Some more what does that actually look like, the better off we'll be. So let's take a shot. I'm a big believer that we view retirement through two lenses. And these are important lenses. The first lens is what I need. And the second lens is what I want. So every conversation about retirement really needs to start on a personal level. And you may think, what about the business? What about the operation? What about the lane? Well, we'll get to that. But I would say we really need to start with a personal view of what does retirement look like? And we're going to break this personal view into a couple of elements. We kind of have two goals. The first is, what does the family actually need to succeed? Right? What do you need from an income standpoint as you age to be financially independent? What would it be that how much money a month would you need to pay your housing costs if you have, property tax even would factor into that? What about feeding everybody? And we're not just talking, canned beans here. We're talking like actual food budget, clothes. You're going to have to drive around. So you got medical care. Everybody's got bills. You may have some debt outstanding. And I'm not saying you can't retire with debt, right? Right off the bat, let's be very clear. We can work out financial independence plans with debt in them. It's not the end of the world. It's not always what we strive for, but it's not the end of the world either. And then taxes. We're still going to have to pay some taxes. Social Security can be taxed if it's higher, if there's any kind of spousal pensions coming in, or if there's IRAs we're drawing out of. So that's really the baseline, right? Like if you take all that stuff and you add it up and you come up with a number for me, that's $3,000 a month, $5,000 a month, $8,000 a month. We all live differently. What does that look like? So let's get our idea around needs, and we're going to put needs, and we're going to calculate them in a minute. We're going to kind of put them aside because we're going to treat needs differently than we're going to treat wants. We're going to save for needs differently. We're going to invest for needs differently. We're going to create income for needs differently than wants. And this is the first paring out that I think we need to do in retirement, right? We're going to pair needs, we're going to pair wants. So we get into wants a little bit, and wants are more fun. Wants are the dream, right? What do we want this retirement to be? When we have a windfall, what do we want that to look like? So let's take the stress, the pressure of running things off your plate. Let's take the stress, the pressure of working off your plate. And then once we take that off, think about the wants, right? Travel, giving, helping out, right? What are we gonna do with our time, with our treasure? Vacations, and then updating, right? The car's not gonna last forever. That truck, you're gonna need a new truck here and there. And so we need to update, travel, giving, vacation, those things we want to do. We want to go see grandkids. We want to spend the summer, maybe a month, and have grandparent camp, right? All that kind of stuff is a good want in retirement. So we got needs and we've got wants, and you have to parse those out when we get started in this journey together, because the whole way we save for those things are differently. And the whole amount of risk we're willing to take for those things is a wildly different conversation. So get the idea of needs, get the idea of wants. That's where we start, right? And all of you are going to have your own takes on this. All of you are going to have your own perspectives, but we need however much $1,000 a month for needs, and then kind of how much you think you're going to use a month or a year for your wants. And then we can start a journey. We can start, what does independence look like? When I hit a level of resources that I can start saying, okay, maybe I can step back. Maybe I can trust someone else to run this for me. And maybe I can look at needs and wants, and if they're met and fulfilled, I can have a great financial independent journey. As we think about needs and wants, and I don't know if you can zoom in a little bit, but the idea here with needs and wants is this: how we have GoGo, slow-go, and NoGo, which I think is one of the favorite retirement conversations that we have with people. Traditionally, when we first hit a point of financial independence, there is a lot of GoGo. Now, I understand that the world we have been in the last year or two is anything but GoGo, right? I travel is harder and more difficult to do. Going to seeing people can be rough, and if you're immune compromised, you probably have just been home this whole time. So traditionally we have GoGo, and as we get shots in the arm, more GoGo. And so what GoGo means is how we spend money when we first retire. Slow-go is interesting because as we age in retirement, we actually start spending less And then NoGo just reflects the fact that we're a little less out. So I want to draw your attention to this figure 2 changes over time on the slide. If you look at how you spend when you first launch financial independence and how you spend towards the end of the life cycle, you'll see that there's some big differences in spending, right? You'll see that your entertainment goes down. You'll see that, you know, you're going to have more insurance, more housing kind of shrinks as a larger percentage here, and healthcare grows, right? This dark blue. So we start spending more on healthcare. We start spending less on housing. We start drawing, you know, we save a lot less in insurance and pensions, right? We make fewer insurance payments as we get older. Usually all that's left in the end is long-term care. And then you can see entertainment shrinks a little bit too, and other shrinks, and transportation definitely shrinks, right? From when we start to when we end. So we change how we spend over time. So when we first start and sit down with this needs and wants conversation, please be aware that needs and wants will change. So we need to build a little flexibility into the model. And I think it's kind of interesting how people spend their money as they age. And then lastly, this challenges a big retirement myth. And the myth is that if I need $50,000 when I retire and it's going to be more and more and more and more and more and more every year, well, that's actually not true. People spend less as they age generally. Right? And with Medicare, that is the case. So what generally happens is you retire and you spend, and then you spend a little less inflation adjusted over your lifetime than you started with. This makes saving for retirement a little bit easier. Without a high inflationary period, we do tend to spend less over time, which challenged conventional thinking, because conventional thinking 10 years ago was, oh, you know, you're always going to spend more. Well, no, that's not true. Right? We spend a little less, and what we spend on changes. Point being, flexibility needs to be built in to what we're trying to do together. Right? Spend less, and then what you spend changes, in some cases dramatically. Right? So that's our first kind of big takeaway on retirement, is that you need to find your targets. What's your need target? What's your want target? And I prefer to do that on a monthly basis. How much would you spend a month to be happy? Right? What is it that would bring you, as we say in economics, satisfaction and utility? A magic nerd word, utility. But what we're getting at with that is what would bring you joy? What would bring you peace? What would be a good life? What would be something that you really enjoy, right? You can dream and be a little philosophical here, and I know it's not horribly pragmatic, but think about your needs and wants. Bucket those in 2 different areas. Right? So that's kind of your first takeaway, is that you have to think retirement like that. Know it's going to change. Bucket your needs, bucket your wants. You're going to spend a little less once you start, and what you spend money on will inevitably be different. Right? GoGo, slow go, no go tends to be how we view that retirement puzzle. So with that in mind, we have needs and we have wants, and I kind of want to get to how we plan a retirement, how we do some math for retirement. And first up, income is the driver's seat for any retirement conversation. It's not about assets. It's not about net worth. It's not about land. It's about income. That's the most important driver in retirement, is what kind of income can I pull every month from my needs, and what kind can I pull from my wants. And the very first incredible amount of income that you're going to get, if you're listening to this presentation, is Social Security. Social Security is an annuity that would be too expensive to buy in the market, right? The market could not afford Social Security in its current form. You would never see a private company offer a benefit this good. Now, there's problems structurally with Social Security, but if you're in your 40s and you're watching this broadcast, you're going to be fine. We're not going to mess with you. If you're in your 20s and 30s, I may mess with you, probably push some dates around. Maybe not horribly meaningfully, but a little bit. I'm pretty sure someone that's already on Social Security, you're not going to see benefits cut. That would just be bloody. And those of you 20 years out should be all right too, from my perspective. So why is Social Security so cool? Social Security is so cool, and I love this graph, because this graph is how we calculate your monthly benefit. Right? Your monthly benefit is called PAA, your primary insurance amount. It's a fairly complicated calculation. You take 40 quarters in credits, you take your highest earning 40 quarters over your life, and then you kind of meld that into a Social Security formula. But this is what I want you to take out of this. The very first $744 that you pay into Social Security every quarter translates into a huge benefit. You get about 90% of that back for the rest of your life. The next $3,000 or $2,700 or so that you put in, you're getting back about 32% on the dollar for the rest of your life. I can't tell you how powerful those first two bin points are. After that, Social Security is a little less of a steep curve, and actually, the more money you put in after this bin point isn't always the most efficient. And if you could completely plan your taxes out, you may work around those bin points. Not all of us have that ability. So the thing I want you to get out of this slide is that first $744 that you put in Social Security every month, if you can afford that, is worth its weight in absolute gold. And when we're talking with farmers, if you have a Schedule C or a Schedule S or a C Corp or an S Corp, you're going to need to pay yourself those kind of wages to make sure you lock in this 90% benefit match, which is huge. If you file a Schedule F, then you need to at least record a net profit. If you can record a net profit, is with Social Security, you can use a Schedule F and you don't have to pay yourself, but then you have to show a net profit to at least hit this bin point as well. Again, if you have a profit and if that's something you can do. That first bin point is worth its weight in gold because for your entire life, you're going to get back that benefit and credit. And then the life of your spouse, if you were the primary wage earner, and they're better off with some of your income than their own. All right. So Social Security matters. Social Security is the best annuity in town. It's inflation adjusted. It pays for your lifetime. It's backed by the full faith and credit of our government. And as far as T-bills and T-bonds go, that's worth its weight in gold on the market. So things to think about. Make sure with Social Security you're paying in something, and that first bin point is worth its weight in gold. The second bin point's pretty good too, and you don't get quite as much return on your money for anything else that you have to pay in. A quick overview of why Social Security is worth its weight in gold. Social Security came around in the 1930s and 40s following the Great Depression as a safety net for Americans. And the safety net is a little different in that you actually have to pay into the safety net as opposed to paying out. And so I'll go over it, and then we have a question from the crowd, and so we'll answer that here in just a second. But generally speaking, for those of you that were born after 1943 or later, which would be most people on this call, this is going to be what Social Security looks like for you, is that you got to make it to 67, you get 100% of your benefit, right? So whatever you've credited in that PIA number, you get 100% of it for the rest of your life. That benefit is inflation adjusted. And if you drop dead, your spouse can choose half of your benefit, let me rephrase. If you drop dead, your spouse can take over that benefit, right? So they can take over theirs or yours, whatever was greater. So that's pretty cool in and of itself. It's like a lifetime annuity, and if you die, your spouse can just pick up where you left off. Now, on the other hand, the coolest part about Social Security is that you can draw on your benefit, and if your spouse is retirement age 2, they can either take their own or half of yours. Now, that's really cool. There's no annuity in the market that would do that. So if you're getting $1,000 a month when you hit your retirement age and your spouse hits their retirement age, they can pull $500 a month until you drop dead, and then they can take your benefit or theirs, whatever was higher. This is worth its weight in gold. There's no product like this. There's no annuity contract that you can buy that's this good. So Social Security is very important. I think we had a question from the chat, which I can take over you.
Yes, Craig, there's a question that is very fitting for this slide. The question is, what is the smartest time to retire, age 66 and a half or 70 years old with a normal health and family that lives well into their 80s?
So the first question is, what's a smart decision to retire? Should I retire as soon as I can take this 100% benefit, or should I wait? Now, the beauty of waiting to the group, so I'm not sure if I can then group chat to everybody here, but the beauty of waiting is that you get an 8% per year raise every year that you wait between your full retirement age and 70. So you get a raise, you get a bonus on that benefit. What that means is that if you were going to get $1,000 a month, now you're going to get $1,080 a month just by waiting. Understanding that that benefit pays over your entire lifetime and the lifetime of your spouse, here's some strategy with that. So one end, if you don't need the income, waiting till 70 gives you an 8% raise for doing nothing. If you're going to live into your 80s and your spouse live into their 80s, you know, it's not necessarily bad to wait. If your spouse is going to live into their 90s, by all means, you should wait, right? So there's two things that we play into here. The first is life expectancy. If you're from a family where people tend to live to make it to 90, 95, 100, my wife's grandmother is currently 90 and kicking and in a retirement community, loving life, doing shuffleboard and playing some sort of weird tennis variety called pickle something. I don't know what it is, but they love it, pickleball. Anyway, point being, she's going to live a very long time, and her mother made it to her 90s, right? So assuming that my wife's grandmother is going to live to her 90s, I assume my wife will live into her 90s too, if not longer. And so whenever you have that possibility of long age, you should always try to wait. Because imagine for a moment, you're going to get this 8% raise and you're going to get that for 40 or 50 years after you start drawing benefits, right? You always would wait if you have super longevity in the family or a risk of super longevity. The other reason to wait is a age gap between spouses. So if you have a two spouses, let's say you've got a husband and a wife and the husband is older. If the husband happens to be the primary breadwinner, if the husband has been the one with a higher benefit, then you're almost always going to wait as long as you can. Because think about that math for just a moment. Let's say that I am 67 and my wife is 57. And then I wait till I'm 70 and she's 60 and I turn on that higher benefit and I drop dead, let's say at 85. Well, now she's 75. She's going to get that higher benefit her entire life. She's gotten the benefit of that while I've been alive. And then she gets 50% of that higher benefit when she hits retirement age, right? So if you have any kind of age gap, it's almost always better, unless you've got a terminal illness, to wait. Okay, so age gap, super longevity, wait. If everyone in your family dies at 75 from a heart attack, what's the point of waiting, right? Might as well just take it at your full retirement age. So that would be my answer to you. I hope that helps solve that concept, that point there. One other element to think about here with Social Security is what if mom and dad live with me? Well, that's an interesting point. While you retire, nothing, okay? So if my pop moves in with me, right, and he's 83, he's in San Antonio, he's living a great life, but let's say he moves in with me one day, needs some help. And then my dad can't draw on my earnings record while I'm retired, but when I die, if I was supporting him, my dad can draw off 82.5% of my earnings record or his own, whichever is higher. So if you're supporting a parent and you paid very richly into the system and the parent did not pay into the system, your parent can actually draw on your benefit once you're gone. This talk isn't about survivor planning, but to say if you do have younger kids and you drop dead and you've paid in, the younger kids can get a benefit as well. All right, but that's a little bit about Social Security. It's the best thing going in retirement because it gives you income for your needs, right? So the next kind of conversation I want to have with you is the cost of income today. Traditionally in retirement planning, we've utilized something called a 4% rule. So if you have $1 million or land worth $1 million and you would be willing to sell that and take the difference and invest it in a conservative portfolio, you could pull 4% off for the rest of your life. So traditionally, we would say with $500,000, you should be able to generate $20,000 for life in a 60% stock, 40% bond, relatively safe portfolio. In other words, you can draw about $1,667 a month. That's traditional. And that does not look at just cash renting your land or selling land in some kind of canceling note or any kind of private annuity. What we're just looking at here is income, but it gives you a good baseline. Unfortunately, what have we seen since 2008? Well, since 2008, we've seen stocks soar, but we've seen yields or income rates drop, and we see them drop in a bad way. So currently we've got lower interest rates, lower coupon. If you go and you say, I want to buy a bond from, let's just come up with a company, General Motors. And General Motors says, I've got this $1,000 bond. We're raising money. So GM sells you a $1,000 bond and they pay you a coupon payment every 6 months, and then eventually they pay you back. Well, we've seen those coupons drop. Safe debt is hard to find. It's not going to pay well. The flip side is loans are cheap, mortgages are cheap. Return, if you need to borrow money right now, it's fairly cheap. But the flip of that is that income is expensive. A bank on a CD, what's a bank going to give you today? 0.5%, 1/4% if you're lucky. Okay. Income is expensive. And so what we've seen, because income is expensive, dividends are cut. Companies aren't paying the dividend rates they used to. Bond yields aren't there. And what that's done is it's raised the cost of income. So we can't use this 4% rule right now. It's not appropriate. It's going to set you up for failure. I would suggest that you use a 2.5% or 3% rule. In other words, consider for every $500,000 that you were going to invest or going to get in proceeds from the sale of a business or land, that you're only going to get about $15,000 a year or $1,250. This is a much safer planning strategy today. Okay. Now, there is a weird element in the market right now. You say, all right, Craig, well, what if I just buy an annuity, right? We've got some insurance salesperson and they keep telling me I need an annuity. What if I do that? All right, well, there's some advantage. I'll give you the advantage. The advantage is I pulled a quote on married 65-year-olds with $500,000, and I said, give me income through their lifetime in the state of Illinois. I pulled this quote about 2 weeks ago and I made these slides. And you could get $2,000 a month on that quote, which is significantly higher than the 16 and the 1250. And that's called a single premium immediate annuity. You give your money to an insurance company and then they write you a check every month until your second spouse dies. The disadvantage, of course, is that money is gone, right? If you both died the next year, that's it, right? It's over. So that was the annuity contract I priced, and it was $2,000 a month. Now there's other kind of annuities that do pay you back, that do give you a cash refund, right? Those would have a lower benefit, but this is the one I priced. You do have a weird flip that the annuity market's paying higher than bonds right now. Right? So maybe a combination effort. Maybe we do, take some of that capital and annuitize it. It's not a bad time mathematically to make those decisions. All right. So we talked about income. We talked about income being expensive. We talked about needs and we've talked about wants. Let's jump into what we do. What is the magic of the math? Here's the math. Okay. The math isn't actually that tricky. It's not rocket science by any means. So I've gone ahead and given you a target. So let's say we're working with a family, and maybe this is a bit high, I don't know. But let's say we're working with a family, and the family comes and says, okay, we've got $5,000 a month that we're going to need that in retirement. That's our need. And then it would be nice if we could give to charity, we could give to the church, we could help out. We could help out at the kids' college, the grandkids' college. We could help pay some of the kids' car payment. We could help pay some of the kids' loan payments. One of the smartest things I do to see kids saving is mom and dad saying, all right, if you pull the money away, we'll match it, right? You don't get the money if you don't start yourself. So it's a good grandparent strategy anyway. And so you want to help out. You figure I'd be very happy. I'd have that utility, that happiness at $4,000 a month if I could get back. So my goal would be $9,000 a month would be my goal. I could be financially independent at this $9,000 a month. That would feel good. All right. So how do we get there? Well, first up, Social Security is going to be a huge part of the needs for most of us. Right? Most of us have some Social Security benefit we're going to get, or if there's a pension, like if you work for the state of Illinois, or if your employer has paid in a private pension, you would be able to use that amount too. So let's say that I know I'm going to get $2,000 a month in total Social Security benefits when I retire, and I'll get $1,332, and my spouse will get 50% of that, or $668. So that's where I got $2,000 from. Okay, so my primary benefit and my spouse gets half of mine. So that's going to bring me up to $2,000. All right. So what do? We figure our needs are 5. Social Security is going to pay me 2. What's left? Well, take 5, subtract 2, you get 3. What does that mean a year? 36,000. If I use the 2% rule, how much do I need? All right, well, 3% of $1,080,000 is 36,000. All right, so just take 36,000 over 3%, and you wind up with, then if I give you $1,080,000 and you draw 3% a year out of that, you should be safe. Here's your math. So give me $1,080,000, you can pull $3,000 a month the rest of your life. That seems kind of expensive, but that's a safer income need rate. This is important, right? Because we want needs in a completely separate bucket than we do wants. And how else could you knock this out? Well, could you find a way? Could you cash rent your land out and get $3,000 a month? Could you work in a private, could you work in a private annuity sale and generate $3,000 a month, right? This is the number you're shooting for need, okay? So as you think about land and you think about outcome, this is your need number. And when you meet your need number, it's pretty cool. The other thing we might do for a need is we could utilize annuity products for some or all of that. Again, we could buy that single premium annuity and say, okay, well, how much would I need for that? That would be about $800,000 was my quote. Again, you lose it though, right? Like if you drop dead, that's it. It's gone. The insurance company keeps it. So that's the gamble you make there. But it does cover your needs. Not inflated though. Inflated ones cost more. Social Security is inflated. All right, so that's your need, right? We start with that core expense. Now, wants, we can get a little more clever with wants, can't we? So with our wants, we can take more risk. Because guess what? If you have a month where the market drops, you don't get your want. You have your needs. So you're going to pull 5,000 out no matter what happens. If March, this market, the bottom falls out, and stocks drop 20 or 30%, which who knows, right? I don't know what's going to happen. Personally, I think once COVID's gone, people start spending again. That's my 2 cents, but who knows? I'm always the optimist. But we can take more risk with this money. And so we can use a higher rate. We can use a higher percentage return. So we can do something here where we're going to be safe. We're going to take 3% of this money out. But with our wants, we can be a little more clever. Okay, we'll put a little more in stocks, put a little more in things that are risky. Take a little more risk with these wants because worst case scenario, you don't get them a month or 2. And so if there's a loss, take 1% of your pie. Right? Take another $1 million, throw it in here, and you can pull around 4.8% out. If things are good, you could take even more. Last year, the market soared. What was like 10, 20% or something? Like you could have taken 5 or 6% out. You could have had more wants. When things are bad, take less wants. Okay? So your wants, you can take more risk with those because you've already taken care of your needs. And that's, I think, the important part of looking at retirement through 2 lenses. Is like needs, fixed, secure. I don't want to take risk here. I'm only going to pull 3% out. But guess what? With my wants, I could target higher. Because worst case scenario, you don't get your wants, but it's okay because your needs are covered, right? So to me, that's a very important part of retirement planning. And this is the last point. You don't actually need to see the numbers here, but I just want to illustrate kind of what we do in those buckets. Is without giving too much investment advice, here's the trick, team, is that when we look at these buckets are what we call asset classes. And this is to show you that there's no such thing as a guarantee in this world. Each year, this company, Callan, puts together this table, and you see it used by all sorts of mutual funds and variable annuity companies and insurance companies. What they try to tell you is this: look, there are some years where stocks do very, very well. 2019, large cap equities, 31% returns. Crazy. There are years where stocks do pretty lousy. Let's go to 2008, negative 37% return. Okay. We don't know, relatively speaking, how our large company stock's going to do. Maybe they do great, maybe not so hot. maybe pretty good. More often than not, it's a positive return. It's not always the most positive return. It's top line here. So I'm going to go back to a good mentor of mine. His name is Jim Holland out of Lubbock, Texas. I worked with him for a couple of years and learned the business some. And Jim would always say, we don't know what horse is going to win the race. We bet on all the horses. It's actually kind of true, right? Investing doesn't have to be that difficult or hard. You bet on all the horses. That's what you're doing with things like a mutual fund or things like your retirement plan. If you have that sort of luxury, you're not picking stocks. You're picking thousands of stocks, right? So you don't actually have to just choose one. And so we don't know which of these asset classes is going to do well. It could be big companies, small companies. It could be overseas companies. It could be real estate. And when you throw land, you throw agriculture assets in here, it's its own asset class. Some years it beats people, some years it gets trampled, right? But this just kind of shows you that once we have these targets, we're not going to be stupid with them. We're gonna think it through. We're gonna buy a little bit of everything because we don't know what the world's got in store for us. Okay. So again, here's how we kind of bring it all together. We say I need $9,000 a month. 2 of that will come from Social Security. With my needs bucket, I'm going to put $1.08 in that needs bucket. With my wants bucket, I'm going to put $1 million in. And so I know that if I have that kind of resources, if I have those kind of assets, I'll be able to retire. And I won't worry. I won't keep myself up at night because I've made this safe. And the markets can go to heck in a handbasket, but that doesn't matter because I've got my needs safe, right? The wants might suffer, but the needs won't. The wants will pop back up. The other thing I want you to know is that we've had bad years in markets before where bonds got hammered and stocks got hammered, all right? Like 2007, 2008 was a bad year for everybody. Okay, we lost 40% of the market, but guess what happened the next year? Boom, up 20, boom, up 15. Right? We earned it back. It just took a little while. So that's the thing with your wants bucket. You have to be able with your wants bucket to take a year or two without your wants, or with fewer wants, and turn back on again. But your needs, we're going to make those safe. So that's like the second big takeaway. Break your needs and wants, have a good idea of what retirement means to you, and then look at breaking this into buckets, and then you kind of know what you need to retire. What's that financial independence number? So we had a second question regarding land. Now's a good time to get into that, and we can kind of have that conversation.
Yes, I think you kind of alluded to it a couple times here. I think we all know retirement looks a lot different for farmers. So the question is they'd love to see some examples of how different farmers have retired. What are some different options, maybe 3 different paths that farmers have been able to go down with success?
Thank you. It's a good question. So, the phrase, house rich, cash poor, land rich, cash poor, we hear that phrase used. We use it ourselves. But the question becomes, it's different with farming because you haven't saved in a 401k every year most of the time. Instead, you've reinvested in your operation. So what do we do with these operations when we get to retirement? Well, we contend income is still the way to go. We just need to create an income stream from the land. So things can be a little different. We have good ideas of valuation. Valuation fluctuates and interest rates and valuation with ag land tend to do this, right? Interest rates are down, land goes up because it's cheaper to buy. And then if interest rates, when they creep back up, land will go back down. So we are looking in the next 10 years, we will probably, unless there's a boom, see valuation prices adjust as interest rates rise. So what can you do with that? Well, the question becomes, there's a few strategies we see. There's this, I am done. I'm done with the stress, the strain, the pressure. Yes, this has been my life, but I'm done. I want to take a different approach now. I want to live by the kids. One of the kids is let's say one of the kids is going to be a doctor, a nurse. Let's say one of the kids is working in law or working for a community bank. If no one wants to farm, that's one option, right? That we say, okay, let's put it up for auction. Let's use a brokerage. And I know it's kind of heartbreaking to even hear someone say, but the emotional constructs. And then if you don't have kids that want to do this, that's an option. And so if we do put it up for brokerage, if we do decide that this we're going to go ahead and sell publicly, it's kind of the cleanest way to do that, right? And we kind of take our net revenues or net gains and we can structure them out over time, right? If we do the right tax sale, if we're smart about it. And then we kind of have our needs and wants, and we can look at that sale point as an impetus of capital. But what if that's not the case? Well, we can cash lease it and keep owning the land, right? And make sure you're paying the property tax, but then the average, lease rate $220 an acre, and yours is better than I know yours. I'm just coming up with the state average from a farm doc piece. But that gives you an idea too of putting that acreage into production. And then what would I need net on that 220 to come up with this type of income? Well, that's pretty, but the good news is, at least with that strategy, you kind of know the needs and wants buckets, and it would be a lot, but it could start getting you there. And with your wants bucket, this works pretty well, doesn't it? Because with your wants bucket, it's a little more, a little less, but that'll be your wants. And then the other thing we've got is installment sales, we've got private annuity sales, and please talk with a tax advisor before you decide which one of those might be best for you. But if you've got kids still in the business, we need income. Maybe if we're going to live there, we don't need as much income, but we still need to create an income stream from the kid. And so the kid paying off the loan to us can become an income stream, paying it off over time. Tie that income stream to your needs or your wants, right? Tie it to the needs, tie it to the wants, as far as the payback goes on those. If we're going to use bank financing, it's a little safer for the parent, a little riskier for the kid, right? And so, but that's also something to think about, that we want to tie the needs and wants to those notes, okay? I would be very, look at the operation, make sure that it's, okay, this is something that's going to most likely keep producing, at least in a positive standpoint, so we can draw some income on a sale. So the kid has that reserve to pay me back, or a key employee, or, however we're going to wind up transferring this land, has the cash available to actually make those payments back. So I think for different paths for farmers, that's the reality of it. Not everybody is comfortable emotionally saying, well, I got this land from my parents and my kids don't want to farm, so do I just sell it? Right? That's hard for some people. But the flip side of that is, of course, the cleanliness with which retirement works. If we do have, family members, extended or immediate, who would step in and buy, let's make sure we have a fair valuation for everybody. And then let's make sure we tie our income payments to needs and wants, and make sure that we know, okay, I am confident that cousins or kiddos are going to be able to provide the need range, that extra $3,000 a month. I'm not confident they're going to be able to give me the whole amount every month, and so I'm willing to look at needs and wants, and I'm going to be a little flexible. I'm not going to necessarily tell them that, but I'm going to be a little flexible in the front of there. Okay. So that's a little bit to answer that question on land valuation. And then just think about, any kind of your alternative, your opportunity cost here, right? Like if I sold it all and invested it, I could pull about 3% off. What kind of rate am I getting from a land valuation sale strategy? What kind of valuation am I getting? What kind of sale? What kind of income can I generate? And is it in the ballpark of 3% or not? Okay, so that's how I would answer that. Thank you for that great question. As far as needs go, right? Like front saving, okay? So let's say your kiddo's not in farming, you're not in farming, you're working, and you're on this call. Well, here's how you get there. It's not insane, it's not impossible. We can look at saving in traditional IRAs, we can look at saving in SEPs, and we're gonna talk about what that is here in a minute, and different business savings vehicles, 401k plans, but to hit a need goal, I need $1,080,000. What does that mean? Well, over 30 years, you could save $880 a month, and you'd get there, right? And that's $1 million. Over 40 years, it's even cheaper. You can scale it down. The problem we run into is when people haven't prepared ahead of time. So what does it look like if you are 57 and you have no idea what's next? Well, then things start to get scary, don't they? The point of this slide is that the longer we wait to start a planning journey, the more frightening that journey can be. There are very, very, very few of us that can save $6,200 a month and throw it in some type of account. to hit this $1.8 million when we get to retirement, right? That's just not really even a feasible goal. You have to start early. And the earlier you start, the easier it is to get there. If you give me 360 months and you throw $880 a month in a bucket, you're going to be worth $1 million. That's pretty cool to that end. But we save for our needs differently. We take less overall risk. We expect less overall return. We save for our wants. We can get a little more aggressive. Okay? So this is another way to think about rewire your brain around retirement, is that we kind of want a needs bucket. We're going to be safe with it the whole time. We're going to be safe as we build it. We're going to be safe as we execute it. With our wants bucket, we can take more risk, right? If I'm planning my retirement early, I can throw this in some more aggressive mutual funds, life cycle funds, and you see it's a little easier to hit my goals because I'm earning more money as I go. So needs versus wants to that end.
Craig, we did have another question come in here.
Sure.
How do we hedge against the dollar's devaluation, which is down 10% this year, caused by the increase in the money supply?
Okay, so you're going to hedge against the dollar, right? So when the dollar gets weaker, the beauty of that is that we typically can sell our goods overseas a little better, right? So sometimes we see when the dollar falls, more demand for US product, right? So a weak dollar isn't necessarily bad in the domestic side of things. So I think how we hedge against it, to actually answer the question, I'm going to go back a few slides and then give you your answer. You're going to hedge against it by not just buying US assets. You're going to hedge against a weaker dollar, knowing that in some cases, ex-US equity, in other words, international markets and domestic markets together, can form a safer portfolio that will give you a little more ability to fluctuate when things go up and down. So to answer your question broadly, the way that you would do that in any type of retirement assets that you have, any type of security assets you have, make sure you're not just buying domestic assets. Make sure you're buying domestic and international assets. And over time, it's like walking a yo-yo up the stairs, right? Just kind of flip the yo-yo up and down as it goes up the stairs, but eventually it gets up the stairs. And you're more likely to hit those goals if you have a larger bucket of uncorrelated assets than you would be if you are doubling, tripling down on all US stocks, all US securities, all US bonds. So my answer to you is, as the dollar gets stronger and the dollar gets weaker, I would hedge against it from that end of things, as far as from a security financial planning standpoint. Thank you for the question. As far as contracting, I think that's probably best for, a different expert to answer that. But as far as building a retirement plan, that would be the advice I'd give you. Okay. So thank you for that question. As far as saving tools go, how do we get to where we need to go, right? And so I know it can often be a little tricky to encourage somebody that may have some revenue left at the end of the year. Okay, well, if we put this away now in some type of securities account, it can help build towards that guarantee need. It can help build towards those wants. And that can be very difficult decision making, because you can say, well, I could buy another truck. I could buy a new truck. I could upgrade materials and look at usage. But, sometimes putting money away for the future can be the better bet, especially with the compounding interest that we saw earlier. So how do I save for retirement? I think that's really the last big nut to crack today. One of the things that we get carried away in is this idea of, well, we should put money in tax efficient accounts. And you should. If you don't have a retirement plan, you can put your money in what's called a tax deferred IRA. And you can get a little tax deduction on your personal tax return. And then you can save $6,000 a year with a $1,000 catch up if you're over 50, so $7,000 total. And then, don't use the money until 59 and a half. There are certain exemptions or circumstances where you can. So if you don't have any retirement plan and you want to put money away and you're not going to touch it until you're 60, 59 and a half, these retirement tools are pretty cool. And so one's called a traditional IRA. You take a tax deduction up front, And then when you pull your money out one day, you pay tax. And that can work well, especially when we're looking at the possibility of someone's on the edge of getting a stimulus benefit from their, on their 2020 tax return. That drop might qualify you for something otherwise you wouldn't have qualified for. Which, a couple other comments on the stimulus, not necessarily for retirement planning. One of the things I would encourage if you have an adult child, someone maybe who just graduated from college, right? If they've been your dependent, you need to look at their 2020. Should this kid still be my dependent? Or is it better for the family unit if this kid files their own return? 2020 is weird in that it's a year where you can get a tax credit for all the stimulus we passed last year on your 2020 return. And your kid isn't going to get that stimulus as a dependent on your return. So normally we keep kids as dependents as long as we can, and the parents benefit as the parent unit. This year I'd look at that carefully. Well, maybe it makes sense for this kid to file their own return for a change. And then they can, the family unit will benefit on that credit. But something to think about. Anyway, side note. So we've got these IRAs you can save for, right? And you can save up to $500 a month in these things, a little bit more if you're over 50. They grow tax deferred. There's something called a Roth IRA. You may have heard of that. With a Roth IRA, you pay tax up front, but then the money is tax-free, which is pretty cool, okay? With Roth IRAs, it's a great place to put money that you don't wind up thinking you're going to use in your lifetime, because then guess what? When it goes to your kids or grandkids, it's tax-free to them too, right? So it's this could be 40, 50, 60 years of tax-free growth and distribution. But the other thing people don't think about all the time is if you don't know when you're going to use money, mutual fund, brokerage accounts, those are taxable, but there's no limitation what you can do with it. So if for some reason you think 55, 56 is more your speed for financial independence, you don't have to use an IRA. There's no rule that says I have to save for my future with an IRA. You don't have to. You just throw it in a brokerage account, throw it in Betterment, throw it in Vanguard, throw it in some kind of robo-advisor, right? They make it so easy to invest today. Fidelity, Go, any of those platforms. So you don't necessarily have to use retirement assets for retirement. That's what I'm trying to say here. So these are ways we can do it personally. Personally, we can do IRAs. Personally, we can do Roths. Personally, we can just save in a brokerage account. We don't have to mess with a business. We don't have to mess with an entity. But I did want to spend a little time today talking about a SEP, right? So a SEP is a type of IRA. It's a self-employed business plan. And a SEP is probably the absolute easiest retirement plan to set up for most small businesses, especially when the family are the only people on payroll and the only employees of the business. What a SEP is going to let all of us do is a SEP is going to let us put 25% of gross of contributions on compensation. Up to $51,000. I guess it's actually quite a bit more now. It went up to, hold on. All right. Okay. So the SEP contribution amount went up, but the idea there is that we can put a little over 50 grand into this thing, or 25% of comp, whatever's greater, for every employee on the payroll. Well, that's pretty cool, isn't it? So if we're actually paying some kind of wages to kids, or we're paying kind of wages to grandkids, or we're going to pay wages to ourselves, boom, retirement plan contribution across the board for everybody. We get a tax deduction for that. I like a SEP because it's easy, because you file one form, because you don't need an accountant, you don't have to pay actuarial costs. It's just a simple plan. And if family are effectively the employees that you're working with, or the employees on the payroll anyway, that could be the best way to go. Though you do want to be careful with 1099 payments for contract labor, but this could be the best thing to do with the 25% of comp, and you can put that in as a contribution, take a tax deduction. It's very easy, very simple to do. Grows tax deferred, you can pull it out tax-free. Simple IRAs, simple 401ks are another type of retirement plan that you can offer through the business entity. Simple IRAs, you can't have more than 100 employees, and anyone with $5,000 of comp can put money in. With the SEP, you can exclude a few more people than that, but with the simple. So the simple IRA is pretty easy. You can, there's no age limit. Employees put 5,000, you can put money in the plan. They have to participate. You can match no less than 3%, and then you're set. With a simple 401k, it requires the employee to put a little bit of money in the plan, and then you can put money in the plan too. But both of these simples have relatively low limits. It's a good way to start people saving. And then with the simple 401k, you reward employees who actually save on their own. You can always do a basic profit sharing plan if there's very few owners. A profit sharing plan lets you put more money in than the SEP. You can just kind of dump money into this thing. You do have to have an actuarial report though. And so with profit sharing plan, talk to your tax advisor. But if you have an operation that has a higher profit year after year and you'd like to make more substantial contributions, opening a profit sharing plan allows the business to put money in. And then if you want the employees to put money into, you've got what's called a 401k election, where the businesses can also, where employees can also put money in into the 401k as well. And so with that in mind, the employee could put up to $19,500 in, and then you can choose to match that. And there are some rules to make sure it doesn't get too top heavy and stuff like that, but those would be more tax advisor specific. And the last way we can really save for retirement as an operation is if you have a consistent positive cash flow, if you have consistent profits year after year after year, you can think about doing what's called a defined benefit plan, especially if there are very few owners and very few employees. Defined benefit plans let you literally put hundreds of thousands of dollars away for retirement every year. You target a need, right? We need $3,000 a month on these things, and then you can put money in to create a present value of that. These are the biggest savings tools. I think they're underutilized quite often, but you do need a consistent cash flow to make that make sense. But for most of us, a SEP gets the job done. It gets it done cleanly. It gets it done well. And it's a good way to kind of start that divestment of everything land into more of a diversified asset and income stream. I want to end today with just some retirement risks we don't always think about. You know, purchasing power risk, we've had a very low inflationary environment for the last while. Inflation is targeted at about 2%. We've come under that. So purchasing power risk hasn't been something we've dealt with. It hasn't been something new retirees have had to deal with. It might be one day. This is one risk against dumping everything you've got in an annuity contract because it needs to be cost of living adjustment. Social Security is protected. Other things may not be. Quality of life risk, we said GoGo, slow go, no go, right? We want to plan ahead. We want to make sure we can replace cars as we age. We want to make sure we can replace furniture as we age. We may want to move as we age, closer to family, continuing care community, assisted living, things like that. Healthcare costs. More and more today, we see out of pocket. And so I always recommend if you can afford a Medicare supplement policy, a supplement policy would be Part F. Absolutely buy one. If your parents can afford one, buy one. If you have to buy it for them, buy it. Right? Medicare supplement plans can be the big difference in out-of-pocket costs as people age. Medicare Part D for drug coverage, absolutely. Even if you have to help your parents out a little bit with that, worth its weight in gold, right? Healthcare costs aren't going down, I don't think, ever. Long-term care cost. Long-term care insurance is a thing of the past, team. And so we got to kind of get our arms around the fact that you can buy a policy with a 5 to 3-year limits about all they sell today. So if you have a long-term care policy with more than a 3-year benefit period, pretend it's gold and hold on to it and put it in the safe because you cannot buy that today. They just don't sell it. 3 years is the cap, what you can buy in the market. Super longevity is a worry. Great. What if you live to 105? You need to have those needs done. And then lastly, you know, we always want to talk about values and retirement go hand in hand. When we talk about needs and we talk about wants, so often our wants is that our values continue through the family. And so when we think about those wants, we can make them tied to values very easily. I want you to save, so I'll match you saving. I want us to take a family trip, so instead of giving you money at Christmas, I'll put on the trip and you come or you don't come. I want to share my values, my time. I want to have grandparent camp and all that. But with that in mind, thank you so much for your time today. It means a lot for me to be here. I appreciate it. And Emily, I'll hand it back to you.
Yes, we are at our time here today. I see it's 11:20 on our clock. Thank you so much to Craig for joining us today and talking to us about retirement. I'd like to remind any CCAs in the audience to claim your CEU in professional development. There should be a QR code that we can scan, or just email your CCA number to our team by Friday to claim credit for that. Otherwise, thanks for joining us today, and everybody have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.